Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. Today's episode is presented by Imperial Pizza, 2 locations now, Abbott Road and also Main Street in Buffalo. Big thank you, as always, everybody out there for watching, listening, following, subscribing. I appreciate you all. This is our Tuesday episode, and I'm being joined right now by my good friend, Anthony Marino, back. Missed you last week, man. How you doing, buddy? How's things going?
Yeah, I know. Been a little bit all over the place. Our schedules have not aligned, but and I was going to shoot you a message beforehand. I didn't because I know you were tied up, but it has been just about 1 year to this week since I've kind of been doing the weekly occurrence with you. What I thought was going to be a summer fling last year, I think that was kind of the exact quote as I was looking it up. It's here we are a year later. So,
wow. Time really flies, man. Holy shit. That's has been that long. Well, I'll tell you what, man, you did a good job early on. I'm like, can't let this dude go. You know, it's
you keep bringing me back, so I must be doing all right.
I feel like we have good conversations, and I have said this before. Joe from Queens, my buddy, and Tone Pucks as well. They're the devils on my left shoulder who kind of get me going crazy. And you are the more even-keeled guy who kind of keeps me, from being too high or too low on things, or at least you attempt to anyway. Sometimes it succeeds. Sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, it's good to have you back here this week. It's been it's just flying by, dude. It's almost like the end of June already, man. It's hard to believe. It's almost Independence Day.
Yeah, it's crazy from that standpoint, but I think, and I don't know, you can relate to this. This is that time of the year where it's, if you're that person that craves Buffalo Bills content, it's like, but you don't want any news, right? Like that time from in between mini camp and the start of training camp, anything that comes out is going to be bad news, right? Somebody getting in trouble, doing something they shouldn't, some unfortunate injury type of thing takes place. So it's like just a quiet month or whatever it's going to be until things get started at St. John Fisher. Like that's all you can really ask for.
Sure. And it's that time of year where nothing really is going on. It gets to the point where people like Eric Wood are asking me to come and talk on their show. That's a dead time of year. Brandon Bean or Sean McDermott weren't available, I guess, that week to talk Bills. But that was a fun time anyway. It was fun to be able to sit down and do Eric's show. Anyway, so today what we're going to do is now I finally feel comfortable doing this because up until this point, I have thought that the Bills they still might make a move or two, but I don't think it's going to be anything significant at this point. I think this is the right time a couple weeks now before training camp starts. I think the roster for the most part is pretty much set where we can go and kind of evaluate the offseason as a whole and come up with a official or an unofficial, I should say, Bills offseason report card. This is not our assessment of the football team. So I want to be clear about that as well. Like we're going to go positionally here, Anthony and I, and we're going to talk about who's in and who's out from last year and kind of come up with a grade, each of us will, for that specific position. It's not a state of the position grade. Like I'll use tight end real quick as an example because the Bills really didn't do anything at tight end. That grade would be incomplete because you have Knox is back, Kincaid is back, Quentin Morris is back. They haven't really added anybody of note, so you can't even really grade that. So again, it's not our assessment of the state of the position. We're kind of offering our analysis of what has come, what has went, and we'll come up with the grade for that. Sound good, buddy?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, man. Let's just dive right into it. We'll start with the quarterback position. Again, we're not going to talk about Josh Allen. We already know how we both feel about him. But one in, one out. In, Mitch Trubisky. Out, Kyle Allen. What are your thoughts on both those players? And then, like I said, afterwards, we'll just kind of shoot a grade at me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel it's an upgrade at the position. I mean, with Kyle Allen as the backup quarterback last year, um, and again, right? You don't practice for your backup to be
Sure.
coming in, but to say that I didn't have a ton of confidence with him serving as the backup, it just felt a little bit like, gosh, if something does happen, just they're going to be in a tough spot.
Yeah.
Trubisky coming back, I can feel okay with. Again, it's not one of those situations that I look at it and say, oh, if something happens to Josh Allen for 4 weeks, Mitch Trubisky can be the man. But he is a quarterback that can make some plays with his legs. Former number 2 overall pick. You've seen him have some success in the league, right? But let's be honest, he's a backup for a reason. But, as we talk about this, I do feel like it's an upgrade. He's coming back to Buffalo. I think that's a good sign, right? Familiar at least with some of the guys. I mean, there's so many new faces in place at this time, but at least with Joe Brady, who was the quarterback coach when Mitch Trubisky was here. So, it brings back some consistency that I can see that as an upgrade for the team this offseason.
I say this about Kyle Allen. I remember so well last training camp, and there were a few things that really resonated and stuck out to me, good and bad. And I remember, and I know we talked about this plenty last summer. He was awful at training camp. I mean, come on. We talk about so many of these guys who are OTA or mini camp or training camp darlings, the guys who, every year there's an Andy Isabella, a guy who in shorts and a jersey stick out to you for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
Kyle Allen, short hopping passes in shorts and t-shirts is not 11 on 11. Simple passing routes. And I remember specifically sitting with one practice with Joe Marino, not related to Anthony, by the way. It's just saying this guy is awful. He was throwing the football so bad. Now, fortunately, of course, didn't end up mattering. And if Josh Allen does go down for a long period of time, Mitch Trubisky probably it's not going to end up mattering anyway. But I agree with you. Mitch Trubisky is an upgrade. He's been here before. Josh likes him for what that's worth. I don't know how much that's worth, but maybe it's worth something. Got to give me a grade. What would be your offseason Bills quarterback grade?
Yeah, I'll give you a B for this one. Right. I mean, and I think with this, again, it's an upgrade. It's nothing too crazy. We're talking about a backup quarterback here. So
Sure.
to me, that's a solid B. And I think I'll be
B
okay.
B sounds good there. And I would say, how many really around the league, how many great backup quarterbacks are there? Where if a key guy goes down, you still could be all right. I don't think there's a lot of situations where you're going to feel great about your backup quarterback. I don't
No,
know.
I mean, it's who was it in the past, right? They talked about practicing if Peyton Manning goes down. He goes, if Peyton Manning goes down, we're effed. And he
Yeah,
goes, we don't practice effed. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of one of those things. Like it's a tough situation if you end up in it. But again, is it an upgrade? Yeah, and I'll take an upgrade.
sure. I agree with you there. I would go a B, solid B, as well. All right, we'll move on here to running backs. So you got one guy in, and he's a rookie, Ray Davis. And by the way, I have a list in front of me. It's possible I could have forgotten about somebody. If I do, let me know. But Ray Davis, when it comes to the running backs, is in, and you got 2 veterans out, Latavius Murray and Damian Harris, who played well early on, but didn't play much for the Bills last year. I think he retired too, didn't he? He's
Yeah, he did
retired now.
retire.
Yeah, he officially retired. So anyway, Harris and Murray are out, and you just have a rookie in with Ray Davis. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and really, when I think about this opportunity, I just look at it as Latavius Murray going out, and it was unfortunate for Damian Harris, right? That's a signing when the Bills made it last year,
Sure.
even though it was at a minimal contract, right? 1 year, 1 point something million. Like we have seen this guy had success with the Patriots, and unfortunately, the injury comes along, and a little bit of just what could have been. Latavius Murray early in the season, right? I mean, we would talk about him, like there was some promise there, right? Even though he was 34 years old. Not just ability as a pass blocker, but what he was doing with the ball in his hands, there was some optimism there, right? There was some production, I guess, that was taking place, but he fell off a cliff from that
Yeah.
production in the second half of the season. So
Yeah.
I look at this. And listen, everybody knows I I like the idea of the Bills drafting running backs and bringing in Ray Davis in the 4th round. The career that he's had, granted at a number of different schools, right? But to rush for over 1,000 yards at 3 different universities, to do that at programs that are not these, world beaters playing behind these fantastic offensive lines. Here's a guy that has made it work on his own. I think it was 22 touchdowns last year at Kentucky. Has the build that he can be an effective pass blocker, can catch the ball out of the backfield, gives you a bit more of that power back than you currently have in James Cook. So while some were like, oh man, I wish they didn't, invest a 4th round pick in Ray Davis. Like, here's a guy that I think is hungry when you hear about his personal story and kind of what he has persevered to get to this point. It is easy to be a fan of his, and I think it's going to be an opportunity. So, I don't want to sound too optimistic, but it's like you're bringing in this complimentary back to James Cook. You're bringing someone in now that, again, Cook has 2 years left on his contract. If you're thinking to yourself, listen, you don't want to go out and give a contract extension to an RB, or you don't want to sign a high-priced veteran running back at some point. Well, you want to be able to develop someone, so maybe you're on that 2-year plan. Right? Then if James Cook, his contract comes up, you got 2 more years of Ray Davis, maybe you bring somebody else in and just kind of have that cost-controlled, low, I guess you could say, impact on your salary cap, right? When you talk about the running back position. So, right now I'm going to be optimistic about Ray Davis, and I like the move that they made at this time. Let's see how he does in camp, but for right now, I'm good.
Look, when there's some positions, and this is one of them here, where I say, what's your offseason grade? It's so hard because we're projecting with every position, but when it comes to a rookie being your only addition to that, it becomes you're projecting even harder because you've literally never seen him play in the NFL. I'll say this about what they lost. I like Damian Harris a lot, but the concern coming in was him staying healthy. Unfortunately, he got hurt. Latavius Murray, I mean, I think you said everything perfectly, but he's washed at this point. What were you going to get? This is additions versus subtractions. Let's say you re-sign Latavius Murray. What were you going to get from him in 2024? Yeah. Probably not a lot, So, and it's tough too because I like him, and the Bills trusted him, especially early on. I mean, he was playing a lot of key snaps. He was playing 3rd downs. The pass blocking, they trusted him. And to your point, he just fell off a cliff. So, Harris being hurt, Murray falling off a cliff. I like Ray Davis a lot. Might not need him too much early on because I also like Ty Johnson a lot. But Ty Johnson's not on this list because he's a returnee. Yeah, man, coming up with a grade. I feel like
I'm having an easier time coming up with a grade than you are, but I've thought about it a little bit.
Okay, well, you drop it on me then.
I'm going to give an A-, and I say an A-, right? Again, we're not like you just said, it's a rookie. The guy hasn't played a snap. You don't even know what you're going to get. And this goes against all the fun I have with everybody on Twitter throughout the offseason and when the trade deadline comes up in free agency. But as you look at this team, right, if you're being smart, you're not investing a big contract in a Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry or going out and signing someone to a big contract at the running back position. Heck, even Ramondre Stevenson getting a 4-year, $36 million deal. All of these guys are nice players, right? If they were on the Buffalo Bills, I would be very happy with what they brought to the team. But to invest those resources there means that you're not investing them someplace that is likely more important. So by saying it's an A-, I say that by it's a day 3 pick, cost controlled for the next 4 years. At least when you look at these next 2 years with James Cook and with Ray Davis, I mean, the total cost of your running back room, right, is going to be under $4 million a year, right? Ty Johnson, if you keep him around, you're in a position where you're not investing a lot of high profile assets, not a lot of dollars, and you should be getting some pretty good production out of these guys. So because of that, and again, although it goes against what I'm always pushing when it comes in free agency, it's the smart move. It's the right move. So I'll give it an A- and feel pretty good about that. And let's see how these guys do.
And you could also say, with respect to Latavius Murray, I don't want to be all kinds of disrespectful to him, but he did fall off a cliff. But he was good early on. But at this point, it's one of those addition by subtraction. Like what is he going to give you? What did he have left in the tank? Not much, if anything. So to have a younger Ray Davis coming in and, like you said, cost control for the next 4 years, who might end up having a pretty big role in this football team. Maybe not week 1, but at some point I would expect him to. A-, B+, somewhere would be in that range for me.
One thing I should give Murray some more credit on too, though. I mean, here's a guy that did bring veteran leadership to the offensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He gets credit for pulling together a players only meeting when, things were kind of teetering during the season. That's not something that should be overlooked. So, again, as I think with this, it's not saying I give it an A-. It's not like a real knock on Latavius Murray. It's just like, again, for the move that they made and how they went about it.
And I mean, expectations matter too. I mean, it wasn't even a given he was going to make this football team when he signed in training camp. So he did, and he contributed. So again, we're not kicking Latavius Murray by any means on the way out the door, but I think they're better off now. So it's two positions where we both think they're actually upgrades at the end of the day. Tight ends, like I said, no changes really. We could do an entire episode on this next position, and that's wide receiver. Because holy change, Batman. All right, so out, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy, quite literally your top 4 wide receivers from last year, all gone. In Samuel, and by the way, I was wrong. I should add Shakir. So 4 your top 5 wide receivers from last year gone. In Curtis Samuel, MVS, Mac Hollins, for now, Chase Claypool. And I'm cheating a little bit. I put Justin Shorter on my list because he didn't play a snap. So I consider him an addition to this football team as well this year. This might, I don't know. Maybe it won't be tough for you. Maybe it will. Let's find out. What are your thoughts right now? Wide receiver position in versus out.
Yeah. And I don't want to be accused of as being a homer when I go through this exercise, right? Because it can be easy to go through everything and say that the Bills made all the right moves.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, maybe at the end of the day, getting rid of Stephon Diggs was the right move.
Mm-hmm.
But eating $31 million in salary cap and removing your best wide receiver from the roster. And listen, I don't know enough of the behind the scenes things. I mean, I hear people say, like, Jay Skursky, I'll always remember this, like he was on Ty Dunn's podcast and said like Diggs was a cancer. Like, I'm not there, so I didn't see this stuff. I didn't know what was going on, what was taking place. So I can't speak to any specifics. I don't know anything other than some like rumors that are out there, this and that. But you make that move, and even all these guys that came in, it's like, listen, I'm optimistic about Curtis Samuel, MVS, Hollins, your boy Chase Claypool. Like, I can look at all these things and say, hey, these guys are, a solid group. You've got some number 2s in there. If Khalil Shakir takes a step, like I can be okay with what they have, but still not give this a good grade. Like, I'm not going to give them an F, but I don't look at this and think to myself like, oh, hey, I love what the team did at wide receiver.
I forgot to mention Keon Coleman, by the way, Anthony. I'm sorry. Proceed. I mean, I literally forgot their first pick. Keon Coleman is in, obviously. Go ahead. My bad.
You were so worried about putting Justin Shorter in there, so the Shorter fans don't go crazy. Don't go crazy with you. But I think from that standpoint, it's while I can like the moves that they made,
mm-hmm.
I'm like, if I'm going to just throw a grade out there right now, I'm giving it like a C- when it comes to wide receiver. And I hope at the end of the season, it's one of those that we we reflect on this and I was completely wrong. And I think there's enough guys here that can do things that the team can be great. And again, that's not a knock on anybody that they signed. Like not even Chase Claypool, right? Like that is the type of thing that I go through with this, but it's just, you decide to eat $31 million in salary cap. I mean, you gave Diggs the extension, right? And I love what Brandon Beane does with this team, but this is the one where it's just like something here is just off. So I can't give this one a good grade and be all kind of optimistic about everything. Again, I hope two of these guys hit, and I really think they can because Josh Allen is still your quarterback. But that move, it still sticks with me.
Sure. And look, man, it's not we all, but Bills fans, you certainly want to be optimistic that things would work out, and they can. But when it comes to this position, look, short of him falling off a cliff, and I'm glad you brought up the off-field Stephon Diggs stuff because I think it is a factor. Him being gone, if the rumors are true about his presence in the clubhouse at this point, a cancer in the clubhouse, whatever you want to call it, that could be addition by subtraction from there. But look, short of falling off a cliff, Stephon Diggs is getting you 95 to 110 catches. You know that. Gabe Davis at this point, you know he's going to have 6-7 games where he catches one pass or less. He's going to have 4 or 5 games where he has 4 catches for 130 yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns. He's going to get you 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, probably get hurt a couple times throughout the year. You know what you're getting with those guys. Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy. Look, this might be silly, and they, for the most part, didn't do shit. But silly take or not, I don't think it's silly. The Bills might not win the Bills don't win the AFC East if it's not for the contributions of Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy in Hard Rock Stadium in week, 18 against the Dolphins. They were instrumental in the Bills winning that football game. That said, I'm not sad about losing them, but you kind of feel, you know what you have with those guys. These new additions, Curtis Samuel has shown plenty in the last few years. I think enough to say, you know what, with a better quarterback, you might see the best version of him. But aside from that, Matt Collins, he really didn't do any. He was good 2 years ago with the Raiders. I like the signing. I like the signing. I didn't do anything with Atlanta. Don't call my Chase Claypool my boy, by the way. Come on now. Chase Claypool is probably not going to be on this football team in week 1. I'm going to be generous. Justin Shorter, who the hell knows what he's going to be. By the way, he is a beast. See any photos of him like recently?
Yeah,
he is jacked. Holy crap, man. Like you have no idea what you're getting with him. MVS, another addition, the other one. I like him. He steps up in the playoffs. Is he, Sean McDermott going to have the patience to deal with drops and maybe some less than stellar route running at times in the regular season? Point being is a bunch of questions, a bunch of things have to go right. And then Keon Coleman, who the hell knows how fast he's going to be brought along. I personally don't think he's going to be all that fast. You said C-?
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like if I gave it any sort of a good grade, then I'm probably not being realistic with
I agree with you.
Right. And it's like you decide to take $31 million in dead cap. I mean, granted, you get a 2nd-round pick, but like we're talking about the state of the position, right? Like for where it is right now. So, and I can like the guys that they signed. And we joke about it. I can like what we've seen about Chase Claypool right now. I mean, heck, even on Instagram the other day, I see him putting in work with Kyrie Elam this offseason. Like, great. All of these guys, like, and I don't even need all of them to hit. Like, if Curtis Samuel becomes what he was with Joe Brady with the Carolina Panthers, and heck, if Claypool comes back and is some version of what he was during those first 2 seasons with the Steelers, Keon Coleman is, what you expect when you draft a guy like that, and Khalil Shakir takes a step. Heck, we won't be talking about Stephon Diggs anymore. We'll be over. That part is fine. Agreed. So, but I got to be, I got to look at the cap in mind. And if I'm giving the Bills credit for what they don't do with an investment at running back and give them an A- at that position because they don't go crazy, I got to ding them for this because you take a $31 million hit.
Couldn't agree more. C- to me sounds reasonable, and I would say it's only even a C- because I think you're going to get something from Curtis Samuel, and I like MVS. I'm telling you, I had a take on my show sometime last week. I don't remember when, but I said, don't be shocked. And this is no indictment against what will be the career of Keon Coleman, but as a rookie, don't be shocked if MVS ends up having more receiving yards this season than Keon Coleman.
Well, and here's the thing
Like,
with
I'm not-
MBS too, and it's like, listen, I try not to engage in discourse on Twitter too much because it can just be a waste of time. But like when the Bills sign him, and you see some Chiefs fans jumping in and saying different things about him and this and that, but when the Chiefs signed him from the Green Bay Packers, he was meant to be their number one wide receiver, replacing Tyreek Hill. Like, for the Bills, they're talking about him being their number 4 wide receiver, something like that, and what they're doing. And if he can, produce anything, right, that's a plus. So I don't want to go down that whole road, but listen, there's enough reasons where you can be optimistic with each of these guys and still feel like, things could have been a little bit better this offseason.
Sure. And look, again, C- is only because I actually think those guys can be pretty good. And I also think Stephon Diggs, how much of a decline we'll see, but he's peaked. I feel like he's peaked. And Gabe Davis, I feel like that's what we saw is who he is. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it is. And nationally, if this was talking Miami with Pat Moran and Anthony Marino, and we were looking at this team, I think we'd probably give this group a D. You know what I'm saying? It's just,
well, sure. Right. If you're another fan base, like, you get that part too. I mean,
sure.
Listen, if we did this like 5 days ago, I could probably give you a better grade than a C-, and you just go through it. That it's all objective, man.
Absolutely. All right, one more position before we get to break here on the offensive side, and it's the offensive line. 2 additions: the rookie center Van Pran Granger, and also I forgot on our initial list, Leo Collins is a new Buffalo Bill as well. Out, Mitch Morse and Ryan Bates. What do you think?
Yeah, I still do not love the loss of Mitch Morris. I think when you looked at the offensive line last year, and when I say it was a strength of the team, like, in essence, like the consistency of having the 5 guys start every game, that in itself is the strength. Like, and let's be real here, like, Josh Allen can avoid a lot of sacks, can make a lot of things happen with his legs. This is not like the most stellar group in the NFL of what we saw last year. But I did have a great appreciation for Mitch Morris, who he was as a player, what he was as a leader, kind of just that calming presence that he would have on the field. Now, listen, there's enough to like with Connor McGovern too, like him shifting over to center. That's not the part that concerns me. David Edwards has started, like, I think 4 games in the last 2 years. Like, there's a little bit of a question mark there, right?
Sure.
Where you had more experience with someone like Ryan Bates. I mean, is Lyle Collins really going to compete for a starting job? I don't know. So, I'm not looking at this and saying, oh, this is a reason why they're going to be bad. I don't expect the line to be bad, but just when you look at it, I think for many of us, it's, that loss of Mitch Morris is one that still stings a little bit. And maybe it's more of like who Mitch Morris is as the person and less of who he is as the player. So, I don't want to get like overly dramatic here, but that one's still kind of lingering out there.
Sure. And let's also make sure that we don't lose perspective is that we're not really evaluating the offensive line as a whole right now. We're talking about who's in and who's out. And they lost a reliable, trusty center, and they lost a reliable, trusty interior guy who could play all 3 positions to start at all 3 positions. And in his place is a 5th round rookie and a guy, Leo Collins, who has not been good in quite a while. This to me is, and a lot of people would argue wide receiver, this on paper offseason, and this is a fluid thing. Look, Van Granger might end up being a stud at center, or McConnell might be so good at center that he was better than Mitch Morris. And then you might say, well, they were better off losing Mitch Morris down the road. But right now, as we're recording this in June, this is to me is the biggest downgrade of the roster. Losing Mitch Morris and Ryan Bates and having a 5th round rookie center and Leo Collins as your replacements. This is a D, maybe even a D minus to me.
Yeah, I don't think I was going to be that drastic. I mean, and listen, I'm not saying to you like I don't think that you're wrong. I was probably going to just give it a C. Kind of along those same lines. Like again, for what we talk about, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit of a shift there, right? I mean, in essence, and as you said, it's not evaluating the offensive line; it's the moves that they made. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you are closer, but you know what? I'll just stick with the C for right now. And
sure. Long as people understand, like I said, you're right. We're not evaluating. Look, Dawkins and Spencer Brown could be, if Connor Montgomery's good at center and Edwards is fine at guard, you got Torrance, you got Brown, you got Dawkins. This offensive line is going to be perfectly fine. It could be a B plus line. Last year, I thought the offensive line was a B plus as a whole for evaluating that unit. Just saying, offseason to me, D, maybe even a D minus. Anyway, take a real quick break, come back, and we'll hit up the defense right after this. All right, I am back here with Anthony Marino, and we are going over the Bills offseason positionally and assigning offseason grades in versus out. Let's go to, instead of going end-to-end tackles, we'll just tackle defensive line together. Plenty of change here as well. In, Austin Johnson, Deshaun Williams, Dwayne Carter, a third-round pick, Casey Toohill out, Leonard Floyd, Shaq Lawson, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Linval Joseph. So a position, again, with lots of personnel turnover.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to be a little bit more optimistic here than some will. And it was really that later signing of Dwayne Smoot that they made, that addressing defensive end.
I forgot him. Come on, Anthony.
He was on your list. Listen, there's a lot of names to run through. There was a lot of change there. So, if you broke them down separately, right? I really liked what they did at defensive tackle. Defensive end, I was more okay with. But when you come to the sum of all of these parts, listen, Leonard Floyd did some good things. Shaq Lawson does some good things. I'm not going to look at this and say that the loss of those two guys, I don't want to be too dramatic. And I say that because, and we had talked about it before with Latavius Murray, I thought Leonard Floyd had a really good start to the season, right? And he got over 10 sacks, and credit to him, did some great things. Don't get me wrong. But as the season went along, he was not the same player.
One sack in his last 8 games.
Okay. So, you go with that. So I don't want to feel like I'm going to, act like that's a bigger loss than it was. And, for the Bills, it's like, listen, not a big investment at defensive end. Let's be honest. Like, we talked during the draft segments of like, hey, are they going to take someone like a Chop Robinson in the first round? Like some of these, options that would be there. They did not, right? You get a 5th round draft pick in Javon Solomon that you bring in that, hey, listen, the kid can have some upside, but, setting some records, but he was setting those records at Troy. Like, he wasn't in the SEC or, in the Big Ten or anything along those lines. So, but for where things are right now, I like the moves that they've made. I think they've made some upgrades here, a couple areas, like, again, just that Leonard Floyd position, really the one ding. But I think that drop from Floyd to Dwayne Smoot, it's like, I can live with that when you're upgrading every single one of these other changes that took place.
Yeah, I would say maybe a small downgrade, Smoot, Leonard Floyd. I don't think it's that big of a downgrade. Statistically, it might look it, but like I said, Leonard Floyd really faded over his last 8 games, including the playoffs, just 1 sack. Shaq Lawson, Casey Toohill, kind of like a wash. I really don't, it is what it is with those bottom of the roster type guys. To me, and this is why I would give this a solid B, maybe a B plus, is defensive tackle to me are big upgrades.
Yeah.
I like Austin Johnson. Deshaun Williams, we'll see. Dwayne Carter, they traded down from 28 in large part to get a 3rd round pick, which they used on Dwayne Carter. I like those additions. And even more than what I like about coming in, I like what went out the door even more because Jordan Phillips can't stay healthy. I think he's retired. Is he retired? I don't know if he's officially retired, but I think he is.
I don't think it's official yet, but
all right. Well, whatever. Regardless, Duke can't stay healthy. He's a splash player. He does make some good plays, but then he disappears. Stupid penalties. I can live without him. Tim Settle, I wanted to like him. He just never did anything. Linval Joseph, mid-season, off the couch guy who really didn't do anything either. So that defensive tackle position depth-wise last year stunk. And now I feel like it doesn't stink. I feel like they upgraded their tiny downgraded defensive end. So I'm going to go with B. It would be an A if the Bills had gotten a better pass rusher than Dwayne Smoot in free agency, or maybe used a first or second round pick on a edge rusher. I'd be even inclined to give this an A. But I feel good about giving it a solid B.
Yeah, I mean, right now I will give it a B. And I think it's one of those that you could see it upgrading if Carter becomes something that, hey, is a third round pick. Might be a little tough for him to get snaps early in the season, but I think as the year goes on. And Javon Solomon, I mean, he's one that, all the early reports have been very positive. I mean, a fifth round pick is a little bit of a wild card, right? Like, you don't just cut fifth round picks. So here's a guy you expect to be on the roster, what he can do. Does he end up getting a chance? Like, I don't know. So, I feel comfortable saying it's a B right now. And depending on what might happen with those guys, I consider them wild cards.
All right. Linebacker, kind of a weird. And by the way, like wide receiver, we go through this exercise, you realize wide receiver, defensive line, those are the two areas of this football team where there's just a lot of turnover. Linebacker. All right. So in Nicholas Morrow, Deion Jones, and fifth round rookie Estefan. It's gonna take me forever to pronounce his name right. Lefosio, something like that. But anyway, linebacker. All right, there you go. Anyway, that's who's in. Who's out? Tyrell Dodson, AJ Klein. One quick nugget before I pass this over to you. If I would have told you a year ago that AJ Klein, Tyrell Dodson being one of the out guys was something that mattered even 1%, I would have said I'm crazy. But he was good last year, all things considered. And he's gone. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, and he with him being gone, I mean, this is a downgrade at the position. I'll just say it, right? I mean, Tyrell Dodson, he proved that he earned the contract that he signed with the Seattle Seahawks. Good for him. Wish him nothing but the best. But when you look at, these other guys like, and if it's, Ulafosho, if he ends up doing something right, the rookie out of University of Washington, that's one thing you hear when I say good things. You hear good things about him as a person and as a worker. How that's going to transition to him on the field remains to be seen. But right now, this is a downgrade. It is a downgrade at the position. Deion Jones, well past his prime. Sure. Nicholas Morrow, there was no one in the Philadelphia Eagles fan base that shed a tear when he left the franchise and signed with the Bills. Again, has a lot of experience, can do some things on special teams. Like, you're not expecting him to come in and be Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, compete for a starting position. So, like, he was thrust in. There were some different expectations with the Eagles because he had to play. That's not the case here. But it does concern me just a little bit because, listen, we've seen Bernard get dinged up. We've seen Matt Milano get injured. We've seen some of those things that take place. Obviously, by the lack of investment, I'm thinking, all right, they must be feeling okay about Milano. And he was getting on the field in a limited capacity during mandatory mini camp. So things all trending in the right direction. But if one of those guys goes down, even just for a game or two, I don't know. We've seen guys, be able to fill in. I mean, heck, we saw AJ Klein be a difference maker in a playoff win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, coming off the couch. So I don't want to be overly dramatic with it, but if I'm being objective, it's a downgrade, and I would give this just a C at this point.
Yeah. I agree with you in terms of offseason stuff. I have hopes that if something were to happen to Bernard or Matt Milano, that Dorian Williams going into year 2 is going to be the guy who's going to take over a starting spot and play well. like Tyrell Dodson did last year. Ideally, Dorian Williams is a more athletic 2023 Tyrell Dodson. I think we could agree on that. Yeah, I just still I don't love Morrow. I don't think Deion Jones is a guy who's probably going to be around long. The rookie, don't know anything about. Again, AJ Klein, whatever. But to lose Tyrell Dodson is just, I didn't think I would ever say it's kind of a blow, but it is. I'll go with even C minus, maybe even get a little bit lower than you. Not by much, though. All right, two more positions here. Corner, not a lot. Jaquan Hardy, rookie, in, out. Dane Jackson. I'm pretty sure I know where this is going, but what do you got to say about this spot?
Yeah, this is a sneaky one that people haven't really talked about this offseason. And there were a couple mock drafts from some prominent individuals that had the Bills going at cornerback like early in the process, right? And we were all like, what are you even talking about? Like, what is going on here? But then you kind of take a step back and you look at it and say, okay, Dane Jackson signs a nice contract with the Carolina Panthers. And you really don't bring in anyone else, right? I mean, I look at Hardy and I see him more as that's a pick that comes, maybe as a backup in the slot to Teron Johnson, but I don't see him making the roster over like a, Cam Lewis to fill that role. So I don't see that taking place. More as like a kick and punt return type of option. And that's going to be his path to making the 53-man roster for the Bills. So, with this, it's just like, all right, now you're Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, Kaiir Elam, who, listen, we all want to be optimistic about. And then you go Jamarcus Ingram, right? Who, again, good, out of University of Buffalo, like happy to see this guy in the NFL and on the roster, but you don't have that fourth option like you did in Dane Jackson, who was your third option last year. Plenty of starting experience. Again, if somebody goes down, here's a guy that has, a couple dozen starts under his belt that can step up and do some good things for you. So you're missing that part right there. To the lack of doing something else at cornerback, even if it's I'm not saying like a over the hill Josh Norman type, like who was still on the practice squad last year, but right, a vet that even if he's just in his 30s, I know Rasul Douglas is kind of that guy, but more so someone that if they're going to get thrown into a position has a little bit more experience. So them not really doing anything there, to me, right? I mean, I guess that's got to be like a D. I mean, you didn't, you didn't really do anything. And Dane Jackson, I know we'd all have issues at certain points. I don't want to make it sound like, oh my God, the loss of Dane Jackson is, gonna be the end of the Buffalo Bills. No, that's not it. But again, just being objective here, like I can't give that one a good grade.
For the purposes of this exercise, and I feel like a broken record saying this, but it's important to make it known. We're not saying that the cornerback position on a whole is a D or an F. We're talking about what they've done in the offseason. Optimistically, you hope that this position is almost kind of like quarterback. Like, well, whoever that fourth or fifth corner is, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And you got your two starters. And if you feel confident that Kaiir Elam is going to be a good third corner, if you feel confident, then who gives a shit? But for the purposes of this exercise, look, they lost a guy who's a starter, who's started plenty of times, big games, a guy that low ceiling but a high floor kind of player for the Bills last couple of years, kind of like Levi Wallace was.
Yeah.
And you replace him with a guy who only realistic path to this roster likely is via being a really good returner. This is an F. I lied to you earlier. I said offensive line was the biggest downgrade. I lied to you, man. Because now I think it's corner.
I feel like this is like the most like negative I've ever been on the show. I hate this exercise. Like as we go through it, as we look through it right now, it's like, and I was even thinking before, like, we're not taking any draft picks into account that you acquire with a Stephon Diggs trade or even a Ryan Bates or any of those things. But it's just like, I feel dirty,
man.
I feel dirty.
Well, maybe we'll feel better maybe before camp or during camp and kind of have a state of the roster where we could talk about this position. Because if we were doing this again positionally and I threw out Rasul Douglas and Benford and Elam, I know you'd feel a lot better. But in terms of the offseason, by the way, remember when Rex Ryan used to say the Bills won the offseason? God, I used to hate that shit. Kind of the premise of wanting to do this. Like, did the Bills win the offseason? Obviously, the answer is no. Especially with the cornerback position. All right, last one here. And this one is an interesting one. I feel like wide receiver was pretty obvious. Offensive line, corner, defensive line, kind of obvious. This one, I'm interested in hearing your takes here because in Mike Edwards, second round rookie Cole Bishop, and also I forgot to initially too, D. Delaney, a defensive back, maybe makes the team. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, they're in. Out. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, two of the greatest Bills safeties in history, but two of the guys, by the way, for now, Micah Hyde out. Should put that out there as well. Two of the greatest Bills safeties that have ever played for this organization, but two guys who are past their prime, to put it generously. Based on that, what are your thoughts with this position?
Yeah, here it's I'll give Brandon Beane a little bit more credit, and not just because I said I was being negative before, but we would talk in the past, you think to the 2023 draft of a lot of conversation of will the Bills look to do something at safety, right? Even if it's your first round draft pick, it's you might be bringing somebody in. They might not be playing immediately, but if you think they're that successor to Jordan Poyer or to Micah Hyde. So I don't want to say the draft of Cole Bishop is almost a year too late, but it's something that we talked about, a year beforehand with the draft. So I think as we go through with this now, I'm okay with where they are. Mike Edwards comes in, 1-year deal, guy with starting experience, done some good things. And, and this is more extreme than to what we were saying with Mitch Morris before, but listen, Poyer and Hyde, this isn't 2021 version of these players. Two guys that what they've done for the Buffalo Bills, they will always be held in the highest regard. They should never pay for a drink or a meal in Buffalo for the rest of their lives. And I hope that would be the case. But, as we go through with this, I can give it a B because it's you don't want to be that team that holds on to guys just because you love them for too long because you remember who they used to be. And it's difficult, right? I mean, the fact that you got an extra year from Jordan Poyer when we thought he was going to be gone last offseason when he originally hit free agency, you kind of got that bonus from him. And it's just it's a tough one, but it's one of those necessary moves that you had to do. You get younger. There's a reason to show some promise in Cole Bishop. I realize re-signing Rapp doesn't really fall into that same category, right, of someone that, making that type of move. But I can be okay with what they did, and I hope these guys don't make me look foolish here.
If we did this podcast 12 months ago, 20 months or 24 months ago for sure, 12 months maybe even, it'd be a B. What are you, nuts? Well, I would have been an F. But and also something you said earlier with the contracts too. Look, they also got rid of, they freed up money. They got rid of two pretty big contracts. Jordan Poyer, they saved a good buck by cutting him. Micah Hyde, not re-signing him to date anyway. His contract came off the books, which was a pretty good contract. Look, they used a second round pick on a rookie they like a lot. And I don't know if you got a chance to watch that Bills Embedded, but they were legitimately, genuinely excited about getting the chance to draft Cole Bishop.
Oh, yeah.
And I like Mike Edwards. He's a winner. You know what? Give me some winners on this football team. Guys who have won it. I want more of that. MVS has won 2 Super Bowls. Mike Edwards has won 2 Super Bowls with 2 teams. Part-time starter. Yeah, that, and if you factor in the money because it's cheap labor compared to what they were paying at the safety position, I think I can land on a B as well. Still not sure that Micah Hyde's not coming back though. Some of my bones tells me we might not.
That really cooled off after his softball game. I mean, obviously he addressed it. He did I thought a good job of addressing it and just saying he's just not ready to make that decision yet. And I think people are respecting that. I mean, you heard it directly from him, so there's no need to speculate, but yeah, we'll see. Our buddy Jerry Ostrowski, who used to collaborate with over at Buffalo Rumblings. He
Mhm.
said, he's like, listen, he goes, if I'm his agent, I'm telling him, like, if you're coming back, that's fine, but you don't show up till the end of training camp. He's like, I'll stand there at the doors of St. John Fisher and block him from getting in, just to be like, do what's smart here. So, we'll wait and see with that one. But for right now, I think it's, you can say he's out because he's not on the roster at this time. And
Sure.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think he's a break glass case of emergency. Mike Edwards is hurt, or for whatever reason, it's just not working out with him. Maybe that's the way it goes. All right, so to kind of put a wrap on this, I'm going through these here because I didn't come up with grades until we did this on the fly. Feels like in terms of upgrades, I think we both would agree that maybe running back is maybe the biggest offseason upgrade, or maybe defensive line. Gave a B out to the safeties too. Downgrades linebacker for sure. And offensive line, we sort of agree on. Sort of.
Listen, man, this isn't the report card you want to come home with from school. Right? Like, let's
it was
be honest.
a difficult one for me, maybe not you. Pretty average, right? So to sum it up, this offseason for the Bills, what would you give it as and I haven't even asked you this until now. It just popped in my mind literally, but off the top of your head, and maybe we'll revisit this after having a week to think about it next week. But if I were to ask you for a complete Bills offseason report card based only on the criteria that we've went through today,
yeah,
what would you come up with on the fly?
Yeah, on the fly, I'd give it a B-. And it's kind of like that situation of, think like if you're the student that maybe you got a C+, but you've been, you ask questions, you show up, you got a decent track record, and the teacher looks at it like you're on that teetering on the fence, and they're going to give you the B- instead of the C+. I look at that with Brandon Beane, right? For everything that he's done. Like, I mean, granted, the team being, $40 million over the cap just prior to the start of the league year. I mean, that's his doing, right? It's not something that he inherited or anything along those lines, but he's worked through it. He's done a good job. I give him the benefit of the doubt. You took some swings that didn't play out, taking some lumps this year to put yourselves in a position for next year to really make some moves. So, I'm not going to ding him with the C+. I'll give him the B-. It might be a little bit generous at the end of the day with all of this, but I think with that being said, I'm okay with that.
By the way, one note, shame on me. It doesn't matter because we both considered it a awful downgrade to begin with, but I quite literally forgot to add Trey White to the corners that they lost, which doesn't really matter because, again, Dane Jackson, Trey White with Daquan Hardy in, that was pretty much a D to an F regardless without Trey White. So that just cements that even more, which, by the way, I know you feel the same. Hope for the best for Trey White. Such a good dude, man. I really hope he bounces back with the Rams. So what did you say, B- overall?
I said B- overall, and then you threw that wild card in at the end, but I'll stick with the B-.
That might make it drop to a C for me. All right, I'll say this. The positions where I think the biggest downgrades occurred, corner, I am a little worried about, because if Kyrie Elam's not good, you can't count on Benford and Douglas both playing 17 games.
Yeah.
So I'm worried. Kyrie Elam, to me, kind of, again, popping in my mind, he becomes one of the more important players maybe on this football team right now. Doesn't sound like it should be, but that could come into play. We'll talk about that on a future episode. But anyway, hopefully that doesn't matter. I consider the offensive line a downgrade, but offseason downgrade. But if Connor McGovern's good at center and if Edwards is fine at guard, the position itself is just fine. I like the defensive ends better. The wide receivers, obviously a little bit of a downgrade. You said B-. I'm going to go C. So somewhat of a disagreement to end this show, but at least we're not giving them no A's and no F's. So
yeah, see how it goes.
All right, buddy. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Marino. Got to come up with some. I know you feel a little gloomy right now, talking about some that is negative stuff here off season. So I'm going to make sure that we come up with something positive to talk about with you next week.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, guys, I'll be back with a brand new episode tomorrow. Talk to you guys then.